This last season, I had abundant cucumbers to harvest. I grew both smooth eating cucumbers and prickly cucumbers bred especially for pickling. I traditionally haven't had a great yield, so I tried new varieties and kind of overplanted. This created an excellent opportunity to experiment with different pickle recipes. I'm Marcy McDonald with Pacific Northwest Suburban Homesteading. Today I'm going to make brined, also known as fermented, cucumber pickles. Originally, I used water bath canning recipes using vinegar to preserve vegetables. This worked okay for bread and butter pickles, a sweet, spicy kind of pickles that work great on hamburgers, for instance. The other kinds I made, including those with peppers and other foods, had great flavor but made a very soft pickle. Scott, the homestead spouse, is not fond of their texture, so I looked into fermented pickles. This is a great way to retain the crisp crunchiness that makes great pickles for eating plain, as well as on sandwiches and so on. To learn more about this technique for making pickles, I picked up a book that covered the basics of fermentation in an easy to understand format. It also has some pretty good recipes. There are lots of different books available online and in bookstores and at the local library. In the description, I posted a link to this book as well as the Oregon State University Extension Service article on the subject, which has good, reliable information. I've tried 2 cucumber pickle recipes so far out of my book. Today I'll show the basic brine and use it to make a crock of garlic dill slices. I'll post a video making the spicy cucumber pickles as well as one with the more in-depth information about fermentation in the future. The first thing that we need to do is to wash our cucumbers. They're grown organically, so they don't have any pesticides or any kind of chemicals or anything, but they are grown outside, so insects, birds, whatever's floating in the air will need to be cleaned off, plus just whatever dirt or whatever is on there. I use a 2-basket method. I put the produce in baskets dirty, and then I have secondary baskets that I transfer them to after I've washed them. It helps me to keep track of what's been washed and sort them as I go. I have a vegetable brush that I use, which is fairly gentle. It's a vegetable brush, it's meant for this, so I can scrub off anything that I need to. So let's get started. Most of my cucumbers are actually not specifically developed for pickling. The varieties I planted for eating produce much more than the specifically pickling kind did this year. The pickling varieties have an advantage in staying crisp according to the catalogs, but I have had good success using any kind of cucumber. For pickling variety, you often have these little prickles on them. You can scrub those off at this point too. In my Fermenting Foods book, they recommend putting your cucumbers into ice cold water for a minimum of 30 minutes. We're having a heat wave right now, so there's not really any cold water coming out of the tap. So I just filled the bowl full of tap water and dumped some ice in there to help chill the cucumbers. The idea is to crisp up your cucumbers so they're nice and firm when you cut them. While we wait for the cucumbers to chill, I'll make up some of the basic brine I'll need. This bowl holds 8 cups and will accommodate 1 batch. For fermenting, it is recommended to use water free of the chlorine that is commonly used in municipal water supplies. The reason we don't want this is the same reason water treatment plants use it. It kills microorganisms. We need the beneficial kinds available in the environment for our process. I have a filtration water pitcher that uses activated carbon, which removes the chlorine. Similarly, you will want to use non-iodized salt. I'm using sea salt, but other kinds will work, but the measured amount will vary based on the size of the crystals. Check your recipes to make sure you have the correct kind of salt in the correct amount. It is critical to preventing your batch from spoiling to have the right amount of salinity in your liquid to suppress the unsafe kinds of bacteria and yeast. Thoroughly dissolve the salt in the water, using warm water if necessary. My cucumbers have been chilling for long enough now. It's time to cut them up. There are many ways to prepare the cucumbers for pickling. Pickles can be whole cucumbers if they are small enough. The varieties I grew this year were not ready to harvest until they were around 5 or 6 inches long. I'll look for a new kind that I hope will be usable at about 3 inches for next season. The recipe I'm using specifies slices, so I'm going to start with that. I'm attempting to cut slices as evenly as I can. I'm not a great chef, but I do get the job done. Some people use a mandolin, but I'm a bit afraid of them after my husband cut himself a few times on ours. I may have to learn safer techniques and make a video about that someday. A food processor could also work, especially if you want those crinkle cut types. I'm just cutting these the old-fashioned way with a knife though. I've also made spears before. That's probably what I'll do next time once I see how these turn out. Now let's talk fermentation vessels. Many folks have grandma's old crock gathering dust in a cabinet somewhere or find one at a thrift store. I wasn't so lucky and paid a premium during the pandemic lockdown to buy this beauty. I splurged and bought the lid and weights to go with it. It's not necessary to go this fancy. A small plate that will fit inside the crock or a zip-top bag of salt water will work just as well. Making garlic dill pickles. I've already put the sliced peppers in the crock. We'll ferment these in here for 7 days or so, and then we'll check them to see whether they're ready to eat. Then we've got the cucumbers in there. I've already put a little bit of the salt brine in there. So I'm going to add garlic. A little bit of black tea. Dill seed. And then fresh dill weed. Chop that up a little bit. And now we pour salt brine on top. To make sure that I have enough brine and everything's below the liquid which you need to fermenting, I'm going to put the stones in to help keep it below the surface, and then we will smush that down a little bit. We'll pour the salt brine on here. Looks like we're gonna need a little bit more. So, okay, while that dissolves a little, I'm gonna go kind of scrunch around in there, see if we have any bubbles in there. So when we put this in there, we want to make sure that the cucumbers and stuff are all held under the liquid, that there aren't any big air bubbles in there to interfere with our fermentation. Okay. There we go. Okay, and it's completely covering the stones. Got a couple of pieces of the dill weed that have floated up. I'm gonna tuck those under. So we want to make sure everything stays submerged. The seeds are probably not a problem. So everything is under the liquid. And then we just put the lid on. You need to leave this at room temperature for 3 to 7 days, and then after that, we will transfer that into cool storage. We'll pick that up in a few days.
A lot of mold across the top. Probably have to skim that stuff off before I do anything with it.
Probably should have been using a larger spoon for this.
I think I'm actually going to put a pair of gloves on to pull the weights out, just to be on the safe side, and also so I don't end up smelling like pickles for the rest of the week. Because they're definitely ready to be bottled at this point, or done whatever we're going to do with them at this point. I can tell just by the smell.
They smell pickly. They're not as crispy as the other ones are. But then again, they've been sitting longer too. Definitely tangier though. Good dill flavor, lots of garlic. I like that. Very good. I like it.
Yeah, a lot of them have gone a bit transparent. Well, that's okay. We got more cucumbers.
Yeah, just a couple more cucumbers to your left there. Mm-hmm.
The last few are proving difficult to corral. Bobbing for pickles. Oh yeah, we want that nice garlic chunk. Alrighty, let's put some lids on these and stick them in the fridge.
Probably gonna have to do some fridge rearranging to put them all in.